Oh, so this is my initial thoughts to Dawntrail. I almost said Endwalker. And this is the first time I've stopped to play the game is to record this video. So I want to say I'm not going to be spoiling anything, won't even be talking much about the story. And when I do talk about the story, it's going to be at the end of the video. And it'll be clear. I'm not even going to say any points that happen in the story. It's going to be very generalization. And that's going to be a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about with my initial thoughts while the rose tinted glasses are still very much on. I think it's July 1st, so early access has been for day 3 now, so this will be day 3. And I've only played the game and slept, and sleeping is a little bit on the back end. So I did also beat the story and did it all in one sitting after, like, I don't know, 34 hours. I didn't skip a single cutscene. Don't accuse me of that. So I took my time with it, really enjoyed that. But anything else I talk about the story will be at the end of the video. So here's my general thoughts on Endwalker. Or here are my general thoughts on Dawntrail. I'm going to leave that in there. Okay, so overall, I think it's a great start. It's a great stepping stone from what Endwalker was. And I don't want to go too much into it because I want people to have their own expectations. But I will say this. When I was playing Endwalker, and maybe it's what Endwalker was, and my first time doing an expansion, I was like, this is kind of a lot. When I'm playing Dawntrail, I was having fun. Like, I was actually, like, maybe Endwalker was just too dark of a story, but Dawntrail, I was having fun. I was excited to play the game. The game felt fun, and maybe that's just what an expansion is. Maybe that's what it's supposed to be. So I will say, like, I've had a blast with everything I've done. The classes, that's the first thing I'm going to talk about. Now, I've only got the opportunity to play like 3 or 4 jobs, but they've all felt more fun than they did in Endwalker, which is a little bit weird because they just built onto them. And maybe it's the changes they did, or maybe it's just because I get to do new content. But the jobs that I've played, especially Dragoon, has been a lot more fun and enjoyable for me to play compared to the previous times when I played. And I only hear good things about Viper and Picto. So, like, I think that's a good thing. So I'll say that I think classes feel fun. The longevity of that, we'll see what happens, especially with the job rework that a lot of people are looking forward to in 7.2. But for right now, I think they're very good. I've enjoyed the combat classes. Now onto some of the content in the game, such as Fates. Fates are super fun to do because they're a lot more rewarding and a lot more involved, and just I also have been doing hunt trains, and it's refreshing to have content that'll it'll punish you if you're bad. And speaking of that, this is the thing I want to talk about the most, is the dungeons and the trials that they added. And I'm not even going to tell you anything about them, so don't worry about spoilers there. But I don't know how they did it, but they changed up the formula a little bit, and I'll let you experience for yourself. I'm not going to tell you what they did or anything. Like, is there ads, or is there 6 bosses, or is there now... I'm not going to say anything other than the content is so much better. Like, it is so running a dungeon that is in a Dawntrail dungeon compared to previous expansions is like night and day. It is like, I will actually be looking forward to dungeon spamming and leveling some of my other classes because of they elevated, or they stepped their game up when doing the dungeon design. And like, I don't know how they did that. The trials also, they stepped it up. I haven't done the extreme yet. I've watched the extreme, and even I'll say this, the normal trials of Dawntrail are more fun than the extreme trials in any trial that we got in Endwalker. So I think they heard your feedback, because like, this is some of the most fun content that I've done. And like, we haven't even got to rating, so it can only get better from here, right? So with that out of the way, and like setting the expectation there, and maybe some people disagree with me, I want to move on to probably the biggest thing that I love about everything that Dawntrail brought is the graphics expansion, or the graphical update. And I was a little bit surprised, because I was like, oh, it's just graphics. This isn't that big of a deal. But it's a massive deal. The zones that they made were like, they took the elevation, or they elevated the graphical update, and they really did that just to show off these zones, I think, because these zones are my favorite zones that the game has to offer. There are some in Stormblood that are comparable, and Ilmag in Shadowbringers is pretty good, but I love all 6 of his new zones, and they make him feel unique and special. Now, I might just be because it's new, and I will take that for like knowledge, or I'll address that like maybe it's just because it's fresh that I think it's so good. But I will say there are definitely 2 zones that even afterwards, that if I don't think they're fresh, that I think will hold up in people's minds of, yeah, these zones are pretty cool. So look forward to seeing those new zones. And the graphics update, I notice it a lot of times when I'm doing hunt trains and there's a lot of people, that everything just looks clearer and better, and you kind of get a little bit more of you're the focal point rather than there's just a bunch of people on the screen, and you kind of pop out a little bit. And maybe that's just my settings, but I feel like you get a better picture of what's going on, and you even see it in the cutscene. So like the graphical update, huge kudos there. Now, huge kudos there. I think the only gripe that I might have, and this is a might, is the leveling experience when doing the story. And I think that's just tied to how you have to level in an expansion. Maybe that's just a topic for another day. It's how the formula has always been. Nothing changed with it. I think I noticed it in Dawntrail that it might be a little bit time for a refresh in that aspect. And I don't know, that might just be a stretch of a imagination of, could you find anything that's wrong with it? But like, if I had to pick something, I think the leveling experience just felt a little bit different this time compared to other expansions. Granted, this is my second now live on content expansion. So other than that, obviously the dye update's good. I've enjoyed that. Getting to see some of the new glamours, but that's new with all of the expansions, so I don't want to touch onto that. But overall, if I had to like sum up everything, I think I'd say that Dawntrail is going to be a better expansion than Endwalker. It, in my eyes, definitely has the potential to be the best expansion. I get that I'm a little bit skewed because I started after Shadowbringers, and I think whenever you experience something after the fact, it kind of can show that you didn't get to experience it in the moment. So maybe that's why I don't hold Shadowbringers as high as I've held other expansions and like other games. But I do really think that Dawntrail, with what they've showed me so far, has the potential to be the best expansion yet. So that's basically how I would sum up my initial thoughts. Onto the story bit. Now, I'm not going to say any story spoilers here. I'm just going to give you a general overview of how it made me feel. And if you don't want that, now is a great time to click away. I don't want to give anyone expectations. I want you to experience it the own way. And whatever you have to do to preserve that, go right ahead. So if you're leaving now, bye. But for those of you who actually want to hear my overview of the story, once again, no spoilers, this is not necessarily the type of story for me. It is a very lighthearted story. It's a very happy story. There are moments in there where you're like, oh my God, this is happening. And it's very different from the fate of the universe is on the line, which for a lot of people is exactly what they wanted to do. And they culminated that feel. They nailed that. If that's what they were going for, they nailed that. Now, that's not necessarily the type of story that I enjoy. I do like the stories where the fate of the world is on the line. So if you're looking for that, there's not that, which is totally fine, because they nailed what they're going for. The beach vacation vibe, it's there. So, and you know, they do have a great story here. It is a good story. I don't think it is the best story that Final Fantasy XIV in particular has to offer, but it's definitely up there. Is it number 1? No. Is it number 2? Maybe. Is it number 3? Now we're about in the middle of the pack where I think it belongs. So that's kind of where I would put it if I had to put it anywhere. I did enjoy experiencing the story and going through the story more than I did enjoy going through Endwalker, but I did enjoy Endwalker's story more. If I had to make a comparison like that, if you understand what I mean by that. And, you know, as refreshing as it was, and I think this is exactly what they needed to do. It does seem a little bit self-contained and not like the start of a 10-year saga, which is totally okay, which is totally fine. I mean, it could be a 10-year saga. I don't know. I don't know what they're planning. I'm just kind of spitballing my thoughts from it. Now, I will say that there may be a little bit of a front-end pacing issue, and I think that happens to do with the leveling experience, because there's a lot to do in the first half of the story, and it does build up these characters a lot. And I won't talk about I didn't care for the characters that much, but that's a me thing. I know a lot of people really like them, but they do a great job of building them up. And I think that's what the first half of the story is for, is building up these characters and getting you to have relations with them and understanding what they are and their motivations, which is a very good storytelling thing. But it just takes a little bit for that snowball to get rolling. But after you get through it, it just flows together and just comes together beautifully. So that's kind of my story thoughts, and I don't want to go too much more into it, because if I go too much more into it, I'm gonna getting into spoiler territory. But yeah, so that's my initial thoughts. So I think that kind of culminates how I feel about Dawntrail. Dawntrail is the expansion that's good, and currently right now is the potential to be the greatest one ever. So that's how I would sum up everything about my initial thoughts on Dawntrail. Now, after I level up all of the jobs and we get a little bit more story and I get to see some of the raids and the extremes, maybe my opinions will change. Hopefully not, because, you know, I really like this game. And, you know, it's looking really good. So, but that's all I have for this video. I hope you have a great day.